Jackie Reynolds stood before the full-length mirror in her penthouse apartment, adjusting the simple gold hoop earrings that complemented her deliberately understated outfit, a plain navy blouse and well-worn jeans. Her reflection showed a woman far removed from the power suits and designer accessories that typically defined her public image. The transformation was striking. Gone was the commanding presence that graced magazine covers and boardrooms. In its place stood someone who might blend into any crowd, someone whose worth might be judged solely on appearance rather than accomplishment. The powerful CEO of Reynolds Financial, one of the country's largest financial institutions, barely resembled the formidable woman whose name carried weight in corporate America. But that was precisely the point of today's exercise. Jackie ran her fingers through her natural hair, which she usually kept styled for corporate presentations. Today, she wore it pulled back under a simple cap, part of her carefully constructed disguise. The woman staring back at her in the mirror looked approachable, ordinary, anonymous. Perfect, she murmured to herself. As a black woman who had built her company from the ground up over 2 decades, Jackie knew intimately the barriers that existed in the male-dominated financial world. She had clawed her way to the top through determination, brilliance, and an unflinching refusal to be diminished by the prejudices she encountered daily. Now, at 52, she sat at the helm of a financial empire worth billions, but success hadn't blinded her to reality. She had heard countless stories from friends, family, and even some brave customers who had reached out directly, stories of subtle discrimination, dismissive treatment, and outright suspicion when they attempted to conduct basic banking transactions. She had seen the disturbing statistics, read the research papers, and commissioned internal reports. But something was missing: first-hand experience of what her customers might face. The idea had come to her during a board meeting last week when reviewing customer satisfaction metrics. The numbers looked good overall, but when broken down by demographics, unsettling patterns emerged. Minority customers consistently reported lower satisfaction rates, longer wait times, and more frequent request denials. These numbers tell a story, she had told her board members, but I want to see it with my own eyes. Her assistant Monica entered the bedroom, concern etched across her face. The car will be here in 10 minutes, she said, handing Jackie a worn leather purse nothing like the luxury brands she typically carried. Are you absolutely sure about this, Jackie? The board would have a fit if they knew. Which is precisely why they won't know until afterward, Jackie replied, taking the purse and checking its contents. A few crumpled receipts, an older model smartphone, some loose change, and a wallet containing her real ID and bank cards. If there's a problem in my bank, Monica, I need to see it with my own eyes. Not filtered through reports and metrics. Monica sighed, her brow furrowed with worry. At least take a security detail. They could follow at a distance. And immediately signal that I'm not an ordinary customer. Jackie shook her head firmly. No. This only works if I'm treated exactly like anyone else walking through those doors. Just be careful, Monica urged. If anything happens, anything at all, call me immediately. Jackie nodded, then took a deep breath before stepping toward the door. A private driver was usually her mode of transport, but today she had arranged for a rideshare service, a final touch to make her cover story complete. Every detail of her disguise had to be believable. As she settled into the back seat of the ordinary sedan that arrived minutes later, Jackie felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. It had been years since she'd moved through the world without the buffer of wealth and position. For a moment, she almost felt vulnerable, a sensation so foreign it startled her. Oak Street branch of Reynolds Financial, she told the driver, who nodded without recognizing her. As the car pulled away from her luxury building, Jackie gazed out the window at the city she'd conquered. Skyscrapers bearing the names of companies she'd outmaneuvered or partnered with over the years stood like monuments to her success. Among them, the gleaming Reynolds Financial headquarters towered prominently, its distinctive curved architecture her own contribution to the city skyline. The car turned onto a less affluent street, and Jackie's mind wandered to her childhood, growing up in a neighborhood not unlike this one, where banking services were scarce and predatory lenders plentiful. Her own father, a brilliant mathematician who never had the opportunity for higher education, had been denied a small business loan 7 times before a compassionate loan officer took a chance on him. That memory had fueled her ambition to build a different kind of financial institution, one that served all communities equally. Had I succeeded? She wondered as the car approached the bank branch. Her heart pounded harder. Today, she was about to find out. The marble floors gleamed under bright lights as Jackie stepped through the glass doors of the Oak Street branch, one of the first she had personally inaugurated 15 years ago. Modern artwork adorned the walls, and sleek furniture created an atmosphere of understated luxury. Large posters proclaimed the bank's commitment to banking for all and equal service, exceptional results, marketing campaigns she had personally approved. The branch was moderately busy for a Tuesday morning. Several tellers staffed the counter, while bank officers sat at desks helping customers with more complex matters. Jackie surveyed the scene with a practiced eye, noting the efficiency of the layout, the professional appearance of the staff, and the diverse mix of customers. Or rather, what should have been a diverse mix. Looking more carefully, Jackie noticed something troubling. The customers sitting with personal bankers in the more private areas were predominantly white and well-dressed. Meanwhile, a more diverse group waited in the teller line where Jackie now positioned herself. She watched as a tall man in an expensive business suit approached one of the tellers and was immediately greeted with enthusiasm. "Good morning, Mr. Davidson. How can I assist you today?" the young female teller chirped, her smile broad and welcoming. Jackie observed the interaction carefully. The man made a deposit and asked several questions, all handled with patience and courtesy. When he left, the teller's smile remained genuine. When it was finally Jackie's turn, she approached the counter with the confident but unassuming air of a regular customer. The young teller, Laura, according to her name tag, barely looked up from her computer. "Yes," Laura said curtly, her tone a stark contrast to the warmth she'd shown the previous customer. "Good morning," Jackie replied pleasantly. "I'd like to make a withdrawal, please." Laura glanced up, her eyes quickly assessing Jackie's casual attire. Something flickered in her expression, a subtle shift that Jackie had seen countless times in her career. It was the look of someone making instant assumptions. "Do you have an account here?" Laura asked, her tone suggesting doubt. The question itself wasn't inappropriate, but the way it was asked certainly was. Jackie maintained her composure, remembering that today she wasn't CEO Jacqueline Reynolds. She was just another customer seeking service. "Yes, I do," Jackie replied evenly, reaching into her purse for her ID and bank card. She placed them on the counter, sliding them toward Laura. The teller took them without a word, then frowned at her computer screen as she entered Jackie's information. There was a pause, longer than necessary, before Laura's eyes flicked back up, her expression shifting to one of unmistakable skepticism. "I'll need further verification," she stated flatly. "Withdrawals of this amount require special clearance." Jackie raised an eyebrow. The amount she had requested, $5,000, wasn't small, but it certainly wasn't unusual enough to trigger special protocols. As the CEO, she knew exactly what the bank's policies were, and this wasn't one of them. "All right," Jackie said calmly. "What kind of verification do you need?" Laura's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'll need to get my manager." Jackie folded her arms, settling in for what was becoming an increasingly revealing experiment. "This should be interesting," she murmured to herself. She watched as Laura walked briskly toward the manager's office, her posture stiff with something that felt like discomfort or perhaps reluctance. The young teller whispered something to a man in a navy blue suit, who glanced toward Jackie with a raised brow before sighing and rising from his chair. As he approached, Jackie recognized him immediately, Jason Miller, the branch manager she had personally approved hiring 2 years ago. She had been impressed by his experience and leadership skills during the interview process, but now, seeing his demeanor from the other side of the counter, she felt an unsettling shift in her assessment. Jason offered a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Jason Miller, the branch manager. I understand you're requesting a withdrawal." Jackie nodded, keeping her tone neutral. "That's correct. Is there a problem?" Jason took a quick glance at the ID and bank card in Laura's hands before returning them to Jackie, barely examining them. For withdrawals of this size, we need to be extra cautious. It's standard protocol. Jackie leaned forward slightly. Standard protocol? I've been banking here for years, and this amount isn't exactly excessive. Jason's smile tightened further. Even so, we have to be thorough. We've had some fraud cases recently. Jackie knew that was a lie. Reynolds Financial had one of the lowest fraud rates in the state, thanks to the security measures she had implemented herself. Still, she remained calm, curious to see how far this charade would go. So what's the next step? She asked. Jason exhaled as if he were doing her a favor. I'll need another form of identification. Maybe a utility bill or a second ID. Jackie crossed her arms. This was beyond protocol. It was discrimination, plain and simple. Tell me, Mr. Miller, she said coolly, would you ask the man who was just here for the same thing? Jason hesitated, the tension in the air thickening. I just want to make sure everything is in order, he said defensively. Jackie tilted her head, studying him. It was time to see just how far he would take this. All right, she said smoothly. Let's play by your rules. She reached into her bag, her next move carefully calculated. From her purse, she pulled out a second form of identification, her passport, and slid it across the counter with a calm, deliberate motion, watching Jason's reaction closely. He picked it up, his fingers drumming lightly against the surface as he examined it. The hesitation in his expression was unmistakable. He had been expecting an excuse to deny her, not valid additional ID. Laura shifted uncomfortably behind the counter, glancing between Jackie and Jason. The silence stretched just a second too long before Jason finally cleared his throat. Well, I appreciate your cooperation, he said, forcing a smile. I'll just need to verify a few things. Jackie raised an eyebrow. I thought that's what you were doing already. Jason didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked toward his office, leaving Jackie standing there, her patience wearing thin. She could feel the weight of other customers' gazes on her. Some were pretending not to notice, while others openly observed the situation with curiosity or discomfort. Minutes ticked by slowly. Jackie remained at the counter, her posture straight, her expression neutral, though inside, her anger was building. This was exactly the kind of treatment she had hoped wouldn't exist in her bank. Yet here it was, happening to her, the founder and CEO. Finally, Jason returned, his expression unreadable. He handed back her passport and bank card. Unfortunately, I still can't process this transaction at the moment, he said. Jackie narrowed her eyes. And why is that? Jason sighed, as if explaining to a child. It's just bank policy. I can't disclose details, but we have to be extra cautious with large withdrawals. You're welcome to try another branch. Jackie inhaled slowly, controlling her rising indignation. He was doubling down. She wasn't just being denied service, she was being dismissed. She glanced at Laura, whose discomfort was now evident. The teller refused to meet her gaze. Jackie smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was time to push back. She leaned in slightly, her voice steady and measured. You do realize I have full access to my account, she said. And if I don't get my money today, there will be consequences. Jason's face faltered for a brief moment before he masked it with indifference. I'm just following policy. Jackie met his gaze, unwavering. Then I suggest you call whoever you need to, because I'm not leaving without my money. Jason hesitated. He wasn't expecting resistance. But Jackie wasn't done yet. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. It was time to make things interesting. She held her phone to her ear, her expression calm but determined. Jason and Laura exchanged nervous glances as they watched her. She wasn't bluffing. The call connected, and Jackie spoke clearly. Hello, this is Jackie Reynolds. I need to speak with the regional director immediately. Jason stiffened visibly. The regional director. His eyes darted toward Laura, who looked equally alarmed. Of course, Ms. Reynolds, the voice on the other end responded. I'll connect you right away. Jason's confidence visibly wavered. He had assumed she was just another difficult customer, but the way she spoke, her authority, her calmness, unsettled him profoundly. Jackie glanced at him, her lips curving into a knowing smirk as she waited. Within moments, a new voice came through the phone. "Ms. Reynolds, what can I do for you?" "Hello, Charles," Jackie said, her voice casual yet firm. "I'm at one of our branches right now, and I seem to be having trouble accessing my own money." Jason's face paled significantly. "One of our branches." "I see," Charles said, his tone shifting immediately. "Which branch are you at?" Jackie turned her gaze directly toward Jason, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "The Oak branch. Your branch manager here, Jason, is refusing to process my transaction despite me providing 2 forms of identification." There was silence for a moment. Then Charles spoke, his voice cool and controlled. "That's unacceptable. Let me put you on hold while I handle this." Jason swallowed hard. He knew what was coming. Laura's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted some papers on the counter, avoiding eye contact with Jackie. Jackie crossed her arms, watching Jason with quiet amusement. Moments later, the phone call ended, and Jason's office phone rang. He flinched before scrambling to answer it. "This is Jason speaking," he said, his voice unsteady. Whatever Charles was saying on the other end made Jason's face drain of all color. Jackie leaned against the counter, tapping her manicured nails lightly. Jason was about to regret every decision he'd made today. "Yes, sir. I understand." "No, sir, I wasn't aware." Jason stammered into the receiver, nodding frantically even though Charles couldn't see him. Laura, standing nearby, looked like she wanted to disappear. Jackie observed with quiet satisfaction, arms crossed as she leaned casually against the counter. She had dealt with this kind of treatment before, dismissed, underestimated, but she never let it slide. "Not then, not now." Jason's voice grew more desperate. "Sir, I didn't know who she was." He turned his gaze toward Jackie, his forehead slick with sweat. "I thought she was just—" He stopped himself, realizing how damning his words sounded. Jason's hands trembled as he set the phone down, his mind racing for a way out of the mess he had created. Laura still stood behind him, looking equally horrified but too afraid to say anything. Jackie hadn't moved. She remained standing there, watching Jason with an icy calm that made him even more nervous. "Ms. Reynolds," Jason started, forcing a nervous smile. "This was all a misunderstanding. If I had known who you were." Jackie raised an eyebrow. "If you had known who I was? So you're saying respect is reserved only for people you recognize?" Jason's throat tightened. No, I didn't mean it like that. It's just," he fumbled for words, but nothing sounded right. Jackie tilted her head. "Let me ask you this, Jason. If I were a white man in a suit, would you have second-guessed my request?" Jason's face burned bright red. "I treat all customers the same." Jackie gave a humorless chuckle. "Do you? Because I was singled out the moment I stepped up to this counter. You demanded excessive verification, dismissed my ID, and humiliated me in front of an entire bank full of customers." The weight of her words settled over the room like a thick fog. Customers who had been watching nervously were now whispering among themselves, the buzz of conversation growing. I was just following policy," Jason blurted, his voice weak and unconvincing. Jackie took a step closer, her expression unreadable but her presence commanding. "You're still making excuses instead of taking accountability. You're scrambling to justify your actions. That tells me this isn't the first time you've done something like this." Jason felt his stomach drop as Charles's voice suddenly boomed.